Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. Good to see you early on this Saturday morning.
Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Well, I wasn't going to assume anything, but hopefully. I came into the office today to do this because I have a couple other things going on, but so I'm hearing the bells just chiming 9 o'clock.
Oh,
We'll
lovely.
give folks a we'll give folks a minute or two to join us before we get started. All right. Well, I have a minute or so after 9, so let's jump in. We're a small enough group. Why don't we just introduce ourselves? We can just unmute and share name and congregation, and maybe how long you've been treasurer in your congregation. Um, my name is Stephen Wilco. I serve as interim canon to the ordinary, and I've been facilitating these events for treasurers through this program year. And I welcome Bob Perkins, who's our executive director of the trustees. Bob, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Bob Perkins, Executive Director of Trustees. I've been at it for this is my second year. Um, let's see what else. No, actually, yeah, this is my second year.
Yeah,
Um, I was treasurer at between St. Andrews and then Holy Spirit when we merged for over about 10 years. So I've had a number of experiences being treasurer.
great.
Anyone else?
I'm Marilyn Ryman, and I was the treasurer at St. Stephen's, and I am now the assistant treasurer.
Okay.
Um, I've been, I was treasurer for almost 4 years, I think.
Great. Which St. Stephen's? You
St. Stephen's in Westboro.
in Westboro. Okay. We have one on each side of the diocese, so I
Yeah,
wasn't sure which one.
great.
Great. Someone else?
I'm Rebecca Madison, and I'm at All Saints South Hadley. And I have been treasurer for less than 2 months.
I'm Steve Adams at Church of the Atonement in Westfield, and I've also been treasurer for less than 2 months. I was treasurer for a couple of years, about a dozen years ago, but it feels new again, so I'm here.
Great.
Good morning. I'm James Lamoureux at St. Peter's in Springfield, and I'm a newly elected assistant treasurer.
I'm Pauline Roy from Christchurch, Fitchburg, and I've been doing this for about 2 years.
And Craig, I think you're the last one. You're on mute. Craig, you're on mute there.
Let me try again. I'm Craig Cronland from St. David's, been treasurer for a year.
Great. Great. Well, welcome everyone. In a moment, I'll begin us with prayer, and then I'm going to hand it over to Bob, and he's going to walk through just some basics about being treasurer, how to kind of organize yourselves and get things going, and things to pay attention to. Um, We'll have plenty of time for questions and conversation. And then I also have a bit of information about building use kind of parameters. I won't be able to answer all your questions, but I can give you some places to begin, and we can have some question and answer about that. We're scheduled to go to 10:30, so we have that time. If we finish early, great, but we won't keep you longer than 10:30. I'm going to begin with a prayer. It's a blessing by Metaharit Carlson, and it's a blessing for paying bills. And it's written kind of as a more for personal bill paying, but I think it speaks to the bigger picture of what this finance work really does mean beyond the numbers and the bills. So let us pray. These piles of paper, packets of jargon, stale signs of responsibility are too often condensed into heavy, salty numbers, causing anxiety and fear. But they are also piles of memories, packets of services, fresh symbols of joy, and lessons learned. Their true power is hidden not in fine print, but in a spiritual language of oppression and freedom. These documents tell stories about generations of policies created by some for all, the disparity of those ignored and those rewarded for ignoring. Each application and payment of political action, a testament to comfort and control, values and grit, need and greed, an inherent responsibility to ourselves, the vulnerable future generations, and all of creation. May we consume with care, pay what is right, challenge power with justice, until everyone can pay with dignity. Amen.
Amen.
All right, I turn it over to you, Bob.
Okay. The first thing I want to say is that you guys have a very important job. Uh, I kind of think it's almost second to the priest, because you're the stewards of the church's finances, no more than you're steward of your own finances. So if somebody wants to put a pool in the back of the church, it's your job to step up and say, we can't afford that, and here's why. The vestry may overrule you, but at least you presented a case of why you can't do it. The most important thing in being a treasurer is record keeping and organization. That's two things. What I do at the beginning of the year is I get a 4-inch binder, 3-ring binder. And what I do is I keep all of the paperwork for the year in that binder. Such things as the annual report, the budget for the current year, a spreadsheet of any special distributions your church does, like Rector's discretionary fund, donations made to ministries or outside charities, copies of endowment fund deposits and withdrawals, those sheets that you send in to me, prior year artist appointment forms and copies of the results of the audit, bank statements and reconciliation forms if your computer does the reconciliations for you, payroll and benefit reports that the diocese sends you, quarterly endowment reports that get sent from the trustees, monthly or quarterly operating account statements and account position statements. And you can also I use a 3-inch binder for the counting sheets if you keep those. And then your secretary or clerk should be keeping a binder of vestry minutes. So that way, when you have a binder, everything is in one place. You don't need to go looking. And when you're replaced, at some point, somebody else has those records to go back to. For invoices, I usually kept them in a manila folder. I would put the vendor's name on the tab and the year on the face of the folder. And you always mark the date the invoice was paid and the check number, or if it was ACH. I keep those invoices in a box. You can use, I don't know if you use Staples to buy your paper from, but those boxes are good for containing your invoices. Are there any questions or anything that you can think of that might help you more.
Just quickly, the ACH, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, if you have, like we had, say National Grid was paid out of the checking account automatically each month. So we would go into set up a National Grid account, which you probably already have, set that up, and then you can have your payments paid automatically out of the checking account, or whatever account you want it to come out of. So that's kind of an ACH payment. Anytime that it's done automatically.
Electronic check payment.
Yeah, sometimes it's called an EFT, but
ACH means automated clearinghouse.
yeah, yeah. So you can do it. You can do it. All of your bills can be paid through either an EFT or an ACH payment. Does that help? Yeah, for me, it's a lot easier to have that done. I mean, you can print out the invoices and save those, but just to have your payments done automatically is a lot easier. Anyone else have anything?
So just on that topic of the automatic uh, payments, right?
Yeah,
One of the things that I have struggled with is we'll call it the documentary support and the approval of things. The point where you have a bill, you want to be able to say that the money went from one place to another place. When you're writing a check, it's very tactile, right? You have a thing and you're saying, I am moving this money from this account to that bill, and there's lots of paper trail to that. When you're doing an automated thing, when you are either, if you're sending it, it's one thing, and if they're
mhm.
pulling it from your account, it's another. But that concept of control and evidence for, a future audit, what sort of troubles, or in your view, what sorts of things do you need to be paying attention to as you're setting up more of that type of settlement from the manual check type of
Yeah,
settlement?
yeah. All of those types of things should have the invoice, like National Grid. You can go in and print out the invoice for that month, so you have the paper for it. And I went in like every quarter or something and printed those out. You don't need to print them out right away, but each place that you have automatic payments made from should have an invoice in there that you can print out so that you have a record. And again, I put those in a manila folder, mark the vendor and the year. And then that way you have that record of, oh, this is the bill that money paid. So you should be able to go into each of these and get an invoice. Does that help?
So, is in your view, then, if you have this invoice and there's it's one thing, it's all very controlled, right? When you know you're going to pay $100 a month to this, right, or whatever, some fix that, so beforehand how much the debit's going to be. It's one level of control, but when you have something, let's say like heating or electrical costs, right, that
Yeah,
could be very variable, or your snowplow guy, right? That could
yeah,
be very variable. So in those cases, you don't necessarily know what they're going to be charging. Um, it's the
right.
concept of
With
having them hit you for whatever they want means that you have to have a pile of money in that account to be able to handle anything, right?
Yeah, so I'd say National Grid because that's the easiest one. You can set it up so you get an email that tells you, hey, this is how much you're going to be taking out this month.
Mhm.
And usually any type of, whether you're doing it through you know, National Grid or Eversource, those types of things, they should have your email, and they'll send you an email saying, this is what your charge is this month. So you will have that advance notice. Now with plowing, I can't really speak to
I made
that.
up
We
that one, but
right.
you could just because it's a little bit bitter this last winter.
Yeah. Yeah. Plowing we paid by check, but some of the other like the utilities got paid, automatically through the bank. And again, as you get the email, you have that record of how much is coming out. So and I get what you're saying is you don't want to be surprised by a bill that you don't have the money for.
That's
But
that's
but
the ultimate concern, right?
yeah,
If they want to
exactly.
charge you $1,000 and you got $800 in the account, you got a problem.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's good to keep track of those things because, your phone bill, your electric bill, um, just keeping track of how much you're spending on those. But there are ways to do it. You can get an email that'll give you a heads up on how much you're going to be hit this month. Anyone else? And the thing is that it's good to post. I don't know if you're doing this now, but it's good to post your finances, at least an income and expense statement, at least quarterly, so that your church can see, where the money's going. We usually did that with the vestry minutes. We would post the vestry minutes along with that month's financial picture. And you also should make sure that in your annual meeting to point out that the largest or the main source of revenue for the church is pledges, so that people know that you're not, this money isn't coming from the air. It's based on your pledges, and we need that to keep things running. Because this is an important job. If the money is mismanaged or overspent, your church isn't going to be around very long. So, if there aren't any questions, I'll get into the trustee side of things. So I'll give you a little picture of how that works. Anything else?
Yeah, just a quick question in terms of communication of the financial results. How detailed a financial statement would you think is appropriate, to present to either, the vestry or the finance committee or the annual meeting? In my mind, there might be three different levels, but I'm just
Yeah,
curious from your point of view,
yeah,
what
yeah.
you
The
what's
vest.
your
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah, the vestry should get detail. They should know where the money's being spent and how. I mean, an income and expense summary is fine, but then if they have any questions, you need to, give them the detail about it. For the annual report and for, just the parishioners being aware, I would say a summary income and expense statement. You don't want to get too much into the weeds because then people start, why do we spend money on this? Why do we spend money on that? And you get into a rabbit hole. Um, and if you need to speak to somebody individually about something, then you can give them that detail. But they just need to know the summary. They need to know you know what you're spending and what you're bringing in. And especially at the annual meeting, because at the annual meeting, you don't want to get too much into the weeds about it,
Right.
but most of the time you're going to explain, if you have any big expenses, you're going to explain what that was all about anyway. We had to buy a new boiler, or we needed to fix the roof or whatever. Some of the big things you might need to explain, but the small stuff is not really that important.
And I'll just mention too that among the resources that we've created is our one around budgeting. So when you get around to that, we've got a video on that that we did last fall. So some of those kind of things and preparing for the annual meeting and those kind of reporting things are available on that.
Yeah. And there's also resources on the diocese website for treasurers. I don't know if you've ever been out to the diocese website for that, but that's also available. It's just, it gives you different topics to click into and go over. Anyone else have anything related to?
Bob, I'll pull up the diocesan website resources and we can just show people
Sure.
what's there.
Yeah.
Um, You should subscribe to Mission Matters if you haven't. That's new on our website. So if you go to our general website and click on the menu down here under Resources and Policies with Parish Treasurers Resources, and you have some cover letter ideas, summary of budgetary items, forms for information about assessments, records management information, right? How long do you keep documents? Those kind of things. Um, and then all our payroll things are available there, as well as these resources that we were just talking about.
Yeah. If you can just go back to one, Stephen,
Sure.
to the main menu again,
Uh-huh.
since I'm doing if you go to Finance and the Trustees, down the bottom there in the Bishop's Ministry, right at the
Yep.
top, yeah, right there. Then if you scroll all the way down, this is where we log some of the things so you'll find a trustee fact sheet, which gives you, what happened. If you want to click on that, Stephen, I can show. This will give you the funds that the endowments are invested in. It'll give you some information about the trustees. It'll give you some rates of return on the endowment funds as a whole. And then if you go back again, Stephen, so the other one is the quarterly performance, which I try to update quarterly, but sometimes it doesn't always get that way. This is just from Mercer, which is the consulting firm that we use. This will give you some information. And there's also, if you go back again, Stephen, there's a withdrawal and a deposit form on the other side that you can use, and instructions for any stock wire transfers that your parishioners may want to do. So there's a lot of information there as well. Thank you, Stephen. That's
Yeah.
good.
And I'm guessing most of our congregations have something invested with the trustees. Folks here, does everyone
Yeah.
here have? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically how the endowments work is that all of the endowment money that's in these accounts is pooled together, and those funds are invested in various investment types: equities, bonds, real estate. And then every quarter we get the market position of all of these funds. I do, and put that together on a spreadsheet, as well as any loans that are outstanding from the Community Investment Committee, all of the withdrawals and deposits that you've made throughout the quarter, and the checking account that we use. And that's all put together, and then it's sent off to another firm that does the massaging of the data to create the reports that you see when you get mailed each quarter. How the spending policy that you see on the forms, what that is you take all of the balances for the quarter of all the investment funds, the checking accounts, the community investments, that's added together, and then that amount is added to the previous 20 quarter amounts, gets an average, and then that average, 5% of that is what gets distributed or reinvested to the churches. So that's that spending policy line that you see on the reports.
So is that 21 end of quarter values, or is it daily? I mean, this is curiosity mostly from my point, but those values you're picking for the last 21 quarters, are those
20,
end of
20 quarters, yeah. So
20?
it's the total of all of the investments that are made. So all of the market value of the investments that are made, that amount, there's 20 quarters, and then there's an average of that amount.
Right. So, but the each of the quarters that are in that 20 quarters, that's a
Yes.
quarter end number. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Any questions about how that the trustees are responsible for managing those investments, and we have a company, like I said, Mercer, that does our consulting for us. So we don't actually pick the type of funds. They'll recommend, certain funds, and then the trustees will make a decision on what we should invest in. Given prudence of that, churches are going to need those funds during the quarter. So, you want to have enough liquidity, but at the same time, you want to get the best return.
Hey, you said Mercer,
Yes.
and they're a fiduciary company?
Yeah. So they don't actually, I mean, they do have some of the funds, but most of the funds are outside of Mercer.
Right.
They'll recommend a particular stock fund or bond fund or what have you.
And everything is
So
added together. Everybody, all the funds that are invested with the diocese are in this same pool.
Yes. Yeah.
So with 20 quarters being the basis, there are only very gradual changes in the distribution
Right. Yeah.
amounts, right?
That
Yeah,
was, it was
smooths
less
out.
than that prior to me coming in a long time back. But they found that using the 20 quarters kind of even things out better. Yep.
Right. Yeah, good.
Now, as far as the forms that you guys send me, um, those need to be filled out very, very clearly. I get some that are, they're written, but sometimes the numbers are hard to make out. Sometimes the name of the fund is a little hard to make out. So if you don't do it very clearly, then I've got to either come back to you and ask, or I'll send it in. And if one of the numbers doesn't look right, the bank will send it back to me and say, what is the right account number or routing number? So those need to be filled out really, really clearly.
For clarity, which forms are those?
The withdrawal forms or the deposit forms that you send in. So if you're doing a withdrawal from one of your endowment funds, just make sure that that's very, very plain to read.
I have a question, Bob, about the withdrawal form.
Yeah.
So I think what we've done at Atonement in the last year anyway was the vestry, the withdrawal form asked for when the vestry approved and the reason for the withdrawal or the use of it, intended use. And so what I think the vestry did last year was to just pass a motion approving the treasurer to withdraw up to a certain amount during the year.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are, planning to withdraw some for operating costs rather than for a special or unforeseen use.
Right.
And I just want to check and see if that is fine.
Yeah, that's as long as I'm not responsible for how you manage your endowments. All I do is I process the withdrawal.
Yeah.
I try to be diligent in, sometimes we'll get back to you and say, what is this? What is this for? But now the reasons are right on the sheet, so that makes it a lot easier. One of the things I will say about withdrawals, and I don't know if you're doing this, is if it's for operations, it should show up in your operating income and expense summary, because you
Yeah.
want to you want to let
Yeah.
people know that you're taking this money to help balance the budget.
Yeah.
They need
Yeah.
to know that. And
Yeah. We have
that's
a line, I think, called trustees used for expenses
yeah,
that does show up on the income and
right.
expense. Yeah. Okay.
Because your parishioners should know, you know, there's only so much money in the endowment funds, and eventually that's going to run out. Of a story, when I was at St. Andrews as treasurer, we did something called the death date. And what I did was I used the deficit that we were running and ran that out for a number of years until finally we had no money left. And then we had a date that we put up on in the sanctuary that said, if we don't do anything, this is this is when we close the doors. So it just was an eye opener for people, and it did help with pledges. But
I would
we're
just
all
add to that. I think, I mean, I think that kind of clarity is really helpful when you're facing kind of an ongoing deficit that people are maybe not tuning into. If you raise the alarm too often, people start to tune it out. Um,
right.
but if you are in that situation, please do be in conversation with us at the diocese, and we have resources to walk with you in that and to think that through. If it's, if you're slowly shrinking your deficit and you're drawing on your endowment a bit to do that, or you're covering some expenses in an unusual year, that's one thing. If it's kind of a growing deficit that you're increasingly drawing from your endowment, that's something that we want to know about, and so that we can support you in thinking about how to keep that from just kind of dwindling down the resources
Right.
that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There are resources that you have to help you out, but um, it's just an eye opener if you really your budget is growing year after year, and it's just something as that people need to see. Was there anything else in regard to either treasurer or the trustees that you had questions about?
We haven't talked at all about, we'll call it capital needs or capital campaigns, or, trying to raise money for an anticipated expense that you don't have yet, but you know is coming. I'll pick on like the air conditioning or heating system, something that is eventually going to be a big tick item. You don't have it yet. Or that you had, like, you came in one day and the heat was off and it was cold, and
Yeah.
you had to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so just sort of I think some conversation about how you might address both of those types of things.
Yeah. If you know that there's a big capital item, like we had a boiler go, we had to replace our boiler. And you have to decide where that money's coming from. Is that coming from one of our endowment funds, or are we going to do a special collection for it? Or, if it's down the road a ways, maybe you do a capital campaign where you're collecting money for a specific item. So there's different ways of approaching it depending on how your vestry wants to, or whether you have the funds available to do that. But yeah, that's kind of a decision that the entire vestry needs to look at. I mean, you can have a
That's a
surprise.
source and use of funds question, you're saying, right? That
Yeah,
clearly the vestry would say, oh, I have to pay $50,000 for something. So
Right.
we either have it in the bank account, great, or not.
Yeah.
We have it in an investment account, great or not. We got to borrow the
Yeah.
money, bummer,
Right.
or we're gonna have to go without.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Exactly.
But
And you need,
that's the thing. It's a vestry conversation to walk them through and help them get to the point of what they want to do in order to address the problem that is being put forward. Yes.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have, an issue with your boiler that eventually it's going to break down and you're going to need to replace it, then you need to have that conversation with the vestry and say, look, you're going to have some surprises. Someday you're going to come in and something's broken and you got to pay for it somehow. But if you stay on top of things, if you have, maybe a building committee or something like that, then, you can prepare for certain large expenses. And I don't know, Stephen, I think the diocese is still lending money, right? They
We
have some
do,
money
yeah.
out of the MWAM account.
We do have a parish loan process, and some folks have used that for some capital expenses. And we usually look for the policy's a little bit open and flexible, but usually we expect the congregation to kind of really do that thoughtful conversation, and figure out kind of what they're going to put in, what kind of fundraising they're going to do, and then kind of really assess how the loan will be paid back. And the limit of that is a $50,000 um, cap. Um,
It's a loan, right?
it's a
Yes.
loan, yeah, and we're
Yeah.
able
Not a
to
grant.
it's not a grant,
No.
right? And we have to, our accounting responsibilities mean that our legal responsibilities mean that we can't just sort of lend it to you at like 0.5% interest, but we can kind of be down at the bottom range of market rate, or a little below interest. So that is an option. It's not a huge fund, so we would tap that out before, every congregation in the diocese can't apply for one at the same time.
Right.
Um, but I would
Yeah.
second what Bob says. I mean, the more you're able to have a building committee really think about those big ticket expenses. I served a parish where people kept saying the parking lot and the boiler and the this,
Mm.
but nobody ever sat down and said, okay, we think these are like have a sort of depreciation plan, right? And things are going to go unexpectedly, but to kind of have a sense of like, okay, yeah, we're going to plan for this.
So
Uh,
you just brought up a key word, right? Depreciation.
yeah.
So in kind of as you're thinking about this from a cash management point of view, if you have depreciation in your income statement, you haven't touched your cash, meaning that you implicitly have a building fund, if
Mhm.
you're thinking of it that way.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good question for this group, in particular for me, as I'm thinking about it, to say, how should I think about that depreciation expense and the depreciation balance sheet item that exists out there, right? How many dollars have we depreciated over the past bunch of years, whatever.
Yeah. Sometimes that's a little difficult if you've got an older church because you don't necessarily know what they paid for the item and then
Right.
how much you should be depreciating over the years. So that gets a little tricky if you're just starting that type of process. But I mean, it can be done, but it's some of the older churches you're gonna struggle with figuring out how much should I depreciate. It's better to plan ahead, if you know you're gonna need a boiler or a new roof or you know a paint job on the church. It's best to start thinking about those things before you really need to do them, and then planning on how you're going to, whether you're going to have a capital campaign. That should be your first. If it's a big capital thing, that should be your first thing. Is we got to set up a capital campaign. We need to know, how much money. Get your estimates, how much it's going to cost, and then say, we need $20,000 and we're starting a capital campaign. We'd want you to contribute to that. So that would be your first thing, major renovation or a major upgrade for something.
We do have a video that we did recently on capital campaigns. Something I found helpful that the expert we had speak to that was to kind of differentiate between fundraising for a capital expense, a $20,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 expense, where you're kind of going to your congregation saying, "Hey, this is an essential expense. We gotta cover this." Like, you sort of run a small fundraising campaign versus a true capital campaign where you're planning a couple of years out, you've got big expenses that you're covering, you're going to think about your mission. I mean, there's sort of two kinds of, things that we often call capital campaigns. And they're approached really differently, right? I mean, your $40,000 boiler expense is like you just got to do it. The big picture capital campaign is a bigger planning process and invitation.
Yeah, if you're raising that kind of money, you don't want to do it in a few months. You you want to spread that out over a year or so. Anything else? Anything that's on your mind today about, gee, I've been doing this. I don't know how to handle this particular item. Nothing.
I have a couple things that are not closely related to your main topic, so they're a little bit
That's
more.
fine.
Okay. So one is segregation of duties.
Yeah.
We've had a little bit of internal debate about how much we have to keep different financial duties segregated. So, for instance, whether someone who's a counter can also be a reconciler, and if a check signer has to be clear of those other two duties. So, any thoughts, wisdom from others? I'd appreciate a sense of how much people segregate those financial duties of
Yeah.
counting, reconciling, and signing.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that you're responsible for is making sure that you have two counters every Sunday.
Yes.
You don't want just one counter. You don't want one
Right.
person in there. You want two people, so that
Right.
there's no discrepancy and there's nobody, doing anything funny.
Right.
As far as reconciling the account, say the checking account, as long as two people, like what we did was I would reconcile the account, but then I would have somebody else on the vestry go over the reconciliation to make sure that everything is there. So you have two eyes on it.
Right.
As far as signing checks, you want to make sure that the invoice is approved by somebody else, and then you hand it off to somebody to pay.
Right.
And then you're going to see that in your reconciliation. You're going to see that check in there. So that's kind of your backup there. But you just have to make sure that there's, if somebody's signing a check, you want to make sure somebody else is approving the invoice. You don't want somebody doing both things, because then, they can pay themselves and create an invoice.
Right.
So you always want to make sure that you've got a couple of eyes looking at something.
Right.
But I think as long as you have those kind of checks and balances in place, and we recognize our congregations are pretty small, so if you've got a counter who's, doing that and then also doing I don't think that's so much of an issue, as long as you have those other checks and balances.
Right. Yeah. If it's
Okay.
somebody, a counter can also do other things, as long as you have two people looking. Yeah.
Right, great. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks. Right.
Yeah, just keep in mind that you folks are the stewards of the finances of the church, and it's your job to, make sure that everything is kosher and you're doing the right thing.
The other thing is just very specific. We are looking to change credit card companies that we use. We have one. I can't even remember the name of it. It's through a local bank, and it's just been extremely hard to communicate with or to check on things, et cetera. So we're looking. And so I wonder if anyone here has, can recommend a credit card company that they're using. I haven't been involved before in choosing, and I'm not choosing it just on my own. We have a few people looking at possibilities, but choosing a credit card company for a nonprofit or charitable organization is something I haven't done before. And I wonder if anyone has any advice.
What are you using the credit card for, Stephen, if I could ask?
So if the junior warden needs to buy some materials at Rocky's Ace Hardware, a credit card is used, and then if for office supplies, those are the two common items, kinds of
Okay.
things that are bought with credit card.
Because we've used a debit card, which is a lot easier, I think. And what we do is we have one debit card that the treasurer holds on to, and then if somebody needs to buy something, you just hand off that debit card, and then they can go off and buy whatever they want. I mean, it's an idea. If you're paying the credit card bill every month and you're not accruing any interest, that's fine. But I don't know, a credit card is kind of a scary thing for me or a
Okay.
church.
Yeah,
But,
I was
a debit
looking.
card works the same way. I mean, you can use that to go in and pay it because you're going to have to pay it anyway, whether you do it through a credit card or through a debit
Sure.
card. So,
Sure. I mean, we do keep it paid off every month. We
Yeah.
don't let any balance accrue. But that's helpful to know.
Yeah, just a debit card would be much simpler, and then that way you're not looking for, a credit card company that will help you out, and then you
What do
have your
others do in this group?
Well, at Rockies, we have an account. So the junior warden goes and says, I need a thing, and they get a thing, and that's it. So every month I get an invoice from Rockies to say, this is what I want, and then I send them cash. Conceptually, I could do that by ACH account. I have a separate account specifically for that type of a thing. So that if somebody is insisting on ACH type transactions, I have that segmented is a separate account, and that is also the account that has the debit card on it. So that for whatever reason, if there's something that is going untoward, people find out about, how to get the money out of the debit card. I know that my risk is limited to the amount that's in the debit card.
Right.
Right. And it's a little inconvenient if somebody hits it, but it's not going to be a major issue to the church. If a debit card was against the main account, that would be a bigger potential issue. So
Right.
I set up a separate account specifically for that purpose, and that has been working well from what I can tell. The trick that is just to be sure that you manufacture the documentary evidence that this is all the stuff and why it was the right stuff and things that we really should be paying, coming through that account. But that's a documentary problem. Important, but it's less urgent. And again, I looked to try to figure out how to get a credit card, and I didn't find any satisfying answers. So that was my result.
Now,
So
Craig,
you
it sounds. I'm
you
sorry.
don't use a credit card.
We do not. We only use a debit card.
Okay.
Now, Craig, when you have that account, do you get the receipts from the people that are buying from Rockies, so that you have a record of how much?
I know what they're buying, and they're giving me. So that's an extra element again of documentary joy. But
Right.
These are things that need to happen so that we know that we're paying for things that are really due to the church, rather than they needed to buy some stuff for their own thing.
Exactly.
So that's
as long as you're getting the receipts, then that's fine.
Right.
Original receipts are always the standard.
Yeah.
And it's complicated because in my mind, you want it to be easy to get the transaction done, and you want it to be hard to remember to help make sure people understand that this is not their money and that they
Right.
need to submit, and they need to be using it only for approved purposes and approved expenses, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera. So there's that balance that you have to have, at least in my observation,
Right.
for that type of a transaction.
Yeah.
It's all too easy to have that type of thing open you up to expenses that you don't really intend. And it's
Right.
hard to stop it once the money's gone, it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So you need to make sure that you have a tight rein on that type
Right.
of account.
Thank you.
We use a debit card, and a local hardware store has a credit card for building, small expenses that we need immediately.
I find that the credit card is better than the debit card because you have a little bit more time to pay it.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
I can just speak for Christ Church too. We do not have a credit card. We have a couple debit cards. But any purchases, we actually have it out of our main account. But we haven't had any issues. Any larger purchases need to be approved by the wardens before they can be made. And then all receipts have to be submitted and they also have to be signed off on by the wardens.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, the only problem on the debit card versus credit card thing, right? So if you have an expense that you do not want to pay, if it's a debit card, it's already paid. Too bad, so sad. If it's a credit card, you have the right to dispute.
Right.
So the credit card is a superior instrument from that point of view. The negative to it is, of course, you just have to be sure that you really have control over that first part of the expense coming to your account.
Our controls have worked well so far on this. We haven't run into problems on our end with the use of the credit card. It's the particular one we have. It's just been a problem of it's not supported well by the credit card company. It's difficult to get a contact to make changes on who's on the account, whose names are on the account, et cetera. So we're looking to change to a better one because we've had a credit card for a number of years, at least 10 years, and auditors look closely, and we've got good controls. I think they've proven to be good so far.
That's good.
Yeah.
We use a credit card at All Saints, and the controls have been good. We've had no issues with it at all.
Could you recommend the credit card company?
I will have to go back and look. Okay. The way ours is set up, originally we're in a transition situation. So at this point, when the rector left, new cards were issued, and the senior warden and the office administrator are the signers on the card. And they hold it, and then we see, the administrator will buy postage online and things like that. And if you need to use the credit card for something, you go to the senior warden, and then the treasurer monitors, the invoices and the bills before things are paid. But I can find that out for you. If you stick the best way to contact you at a text number or something in the chat, then I will definitely do that.
Good. I'll do that. Thank you, Rebecca. And that brings to mind, I was meaning to ask anyway, Stephen, I sat in on one of these training sessions you did, not the capital campaign, but another one maybe a month or two ago. And Gene Giacometti, who is the outgoing treasurer, he asked me afterwards if we have a list of contacts of emails and names of the other treasurers in the group and the assistant treasurers. And I said, no, that could be helpful. Maybe I can ask Stephen Wilco that. So If that's possible sometime, I would find that a really good resource to, have some names and contact of
Yeah.
some other
Yeah, we have that in the
folks.
database. I've
Yeah.
used that
Okay.
database to send out, emails to all the treasurers. So
Yeah.
we do have that available.
Yeah. We can't, we have to get everyone's permission before we can share it, but we could think about let me look into how we could
Okay.
do that. Especially, I think it's especially helpful too, just to have your local folks. I mean, it's great to have the whole diocese, but, especially to be able to call up, your couple of neighboring parishes and say, hey, how you doing this
Yeah,
thing?
it's
Right.
one of those things where it's everybody's personal email, so you don't want to be giving it
Right.
out to
Yeah.
everybody. But
Gotcha.
if you've got, some local people that are that want to stay in touch, then we can figure that out, I guess.
But I've made a note. I'll look into maybe
If
how we do.
possible, it'd be great.
Yeah. While you all are thinking of some other questions, I wanted to, one of the things that came up as a topic of conversation, and one of these is kind of around building use and income. So I just wanted to share a couple of things briefly about that. I know that you all as treasurers handle the money piece of it, and you often end up in the conversations about making the decisions around it. So I'm going to say some about the finances, but also kind of about the process. And I would say, the kind of overarching theory behind it is to think about it missionally and not just as an income maker. I think good quality rental use of the space can help boost your budget. It doesn't usually solve your budget problems if you've got big ones. So to really think about that is kind of what aligns with your mission and how can you use that, so that you're good stewards of your space, of your building. It's not just sitting empty. And how can you utilize that to deepen your relationships with people in the neighborhood and the community? And so, and then I'll just give this caveat that what I'm about to say is not legal or advice. I'm not a lawyer nor an accountant, and we don't have an official relationship. So I'm just giving you some parameters. I have talked to our chancellor, and I have, I've read some documents and so forth, but this is not formal legal advice. But one thing is that our chancellor strongly recommends that you not do a lease with tenants, but that you do a license agreement with tenants. It really changes kind of what the legal parameters are and protects the church a little more. And I have a sample license agreement that I'm going to pop in the chat, and we'll send it out with the follow-up materials. It's something you can use as a template for your groups. And that you should make sure that you're getting a certificate of insurance from any groups that are using your space, and that you're letting your own insurance company know what groups are in and out of your space, even when you have that certificate of insurance. You want them to be responsible for their own liability and so forth. It doesn't absolve you of all responsibility, but it is an extra layer of protection there. And keep those on file and renew them on an annual basis. And then, one of the biggest questions churches have is how do we account for all this money, and, how can we as a nonprofit take in rental income? The parameters around this are not always cut and dry. Generally speaking, if the rental income is not a, exceptionally high part of your overall income budget, and you're renting to nonprofits, you're generally covered. But if you are dedicating an entire part of your building on a more or less permanent basis to an entity, your town assessors can make the argument, and we have had this. I've not heard of this so much in Massachusetts, but this was a real issue in New Hampshire, and so it can happen that the town assessors will start to go after churches who are renting out space. Say to a daycare.
Right.
If the daycare has the whole section of the church, they can make the argument that that's not you know, sort of faith use of the space, and so that portion becomes taxable for property taxes. So those are the kind of things you want to look out for. I mean, the license agreement helps you. You know, if it's not exclusive use of the space all the time, that's helpful. Um, you know, some churches, I hear this all the time when I'm talking to folks about this. They use all kinds of creative terms other than rent. There's this kind of idea that, oh yeah, we churches can't receive rent, but we can receive donations for the use of the space. And you know, I think that's great to not call it rent. At the same time, that doesn't totally doesn't absolve all your legal and financial accounting problems. So just be conscious of what you're doing, and if you're entering into an agreement with a formal entity, a business, even a nonprofit business like a daycare. And daycares can be for profit or nonprofit. But you know, if you're entering into a big long-term agreement, contact us at the diocese and let us know. But also it's worth just checking with a lawyer and accountant to just kind of make sure you're doing all that in a way that's appropriate and helpful and keeps the church legally, insurance-wise, and financially protected. Places that a couple of big places to look out for if you're renting out parking space to the public, that is a place where that gets really dicey financially. That may be unrelated business income that becomes taxable. And if you have outstanding debt on your property and you're using income to pay that, that also can trigger some other financial things. So those are two big ones that I'm aware of to look out for. As you're looking at all that. So that's a whole bunch of information there about building use, but any questions on that?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment because I came in at the end of the building discussion. We recently, within the last few years, have been renting to food share, which our town sees as a mission of the church,
Of course, sure.
and AA and other things. But we transfer that money to our building maintenance, the rent to the building maintenance every month because we have an old building and a lot of deferred maintenance and so all rent by vestry vote has been transferred, not used for the operating budget, so to say, so to speak, but those big projects that we need to do.
Does that actually absolve the
No,
potential
I
business
don't
income? I didn't think
don't
so.
think
All
so.
right. Because I can
No, but
imagine all kinds of arrangements.
No,
yeah,
I don't think that absolves
it
us.
doesn't, but I do think, you know, it's helpful. You know, it gets really difficult to calculate. Like, you know, if you've got a group using your space on a regular basis, how much of your utilities, how much of the, you know, the space, you know, the overall space. I mean, that gets really complicated to figure out. But if you can do some kind of accounting for kind of the wear and tear on the building and utilities, that does help. Again, I'm not an accountant. I'm not giving formal advice, but it does kind of help you if you ever get into a sticky situation and get reviewed in that regard to
It
have a
does
sense
seem
of what your expenses are versus the income. Yeah.
it seems like it's a matter of extent. If you're charging $1 and you can clearly say we're spending 100, then you're in a situation where it's pretty you can make the case. But if you turn that around, you get 100 and you're only spending $1, then you know on some then you have a different matter. You do have to think about, and I think that's your advice, Stephen, is to say
Right.
think about these external revenue sources as not just, hey, we're a church, go us, but rather, is this in its substance unrelated business income? And if
Right.
it is, then you need to think, or if it might be, that's when I think you're saying
Consult with
the
someone.
right thing to do to keep everything in the right place is to initiate a conversation with the diocese, and you guys will help make sure that we all get to the right place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, any other questions that you've thought of about treasurer role, or anything else you want to share, or topics you want us to cover in the future?
So I got a question for, I'm going to say, supply priests and 1099s and that sort of a thing. So I'm imagining, I mean, in their current universe, we've been able to use the diocese payroll system. And so from our point of view, we're great. You guys take the money, you pay the people, you deal with all the accounting, life is great. But going forward, and any supply priests we've had has all been de minimis, a few $100 here and there, not at the point where you're crossing any thresholds, if you will.
Uh-huh. And you're about to do that because I just helped you book one supply priest for 4 weekends, and there you go, you've hit the threshold.
I think we're over the threshold.
The threshold is going up next year.
Oh, is it? I hadn't heard that.
I believe it's going to 2,000 from 600, so that's going to be very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
that is good to know. But the threshold has been, and I was talking at the same time. What did you say the new one is? It was 600.
It was 600.
I believe it's going to 2,000.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that'll be helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. If you are in a situation where you're using a lot of supply priests and the same person over, you're gonna trigger that. You may even trigger that 2,000. So
right.
Yeah. And so you owe that. You need to issue that person a 1099.
I mean, it's not just like you write it with crayon on a piece of paper and give it to them, right? I mean, there's a whole process.
It's not overly cumbersome. You should get a W-4 from them.
Okay.
And so that you have their tax information up front and be clear that that's, so that they understand too. I mean, they should hopefully know, but and then at the end of the year, yeah, there are a couple of I think Bob, do you know there's a couple of software things or you can
I mean you can download a form from the government's website. The other thing that I want to bring up, it's not just for supply, it's anybody that's not incorporated. So if you have a plow guy that just does it on the side, he has his own business, but he's not incorporated, you still need to issue a 1099 if you go over that limit. So it's not just limited to supply priests, it's other areas that you need to be aware of. Your landscaping, anything where anybody that doesn't have is not incorporated, then you need to issue a 1099 as well.
Got it. So if you're going to a plow guy, but the plow guy is Plow Guy Inc., you're fine. Give him the money, you're fine.
Right.
But if you're doing a plow guy whose name is George, then George, you need to go through and say, by the way, George, here's your money, but you also get a 1099, deal with it.
Yeah.
So, and that's a very important part of we'll call it the contracting element here, right? So if you're going to be dealing with that, then you need to be sure you have some tax ID to attribute all that money to.
Right. Yeah. You should get a W-4 from, everybody.
Got it.
All these local people.
Are we responsible to pay on a 1099 on a supply or a plow guy? Are we responsible to pay things like Medicare and?
No.
That's the difference in the 1099.
That's
that you're not doing. You don't have to pay any of that.
You just say whatever the number is, there you go, see you, bye, you're done.
Yeah.
They have to deal with whatever the things are. And that reporting goes not just to them, but you have to do something on
the IRS.
You have to send it to the IRS as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question on that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
But we had that come up this year with our supply priests because we did have a lot. And so we triggered that for a couple of them. We had always, when we write the check and account for it, we always put their supply rate plus the mileage. And so the question came up this year, is the mileage included on the 1099 or not? And do you guys have a stance on that and some guidance?
It's not, because it's not, it's an expense reimbursement, not income. So as long as you're not exceeding the IRS allowable rate, which you're probably not. You're probably using that published rate.
Correct.
Then you're just the income.
Yeah, just the income, right? Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so we're changing how we're accounting for it now and separating those two out so that we can separate that number. But we had always done it that way. I just think we hadn't triggered it too much.
Yeah.
So it hadn't come up as an issue.
We're just starting
Thank you.
with a lot of supply, and in our budget, in our reconciliation process, the check includes the mileage, but when in the accounting process, it shows just what they get as the supply priest and what just the mileage is for all those supply priests. So it's very clear.
Yeah.
Is the miles from their house to your church, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Round trip.
So, yep. So if you have an employee, the mileage from their home to the workplace is not covered. But
Right.
because they're an independent contractor, that mileage is covered anywhere from their house to the church and back.
Thank you.
Thanks, IRS, for all these complicated.
Yeah, right.
Great questions. Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, you know where to find us, I hope. We're here. Bob's available, especially around trustees questions. He's always got great answers when I go to him with questions about things. So please reach out if anything comes up that you didn't think of today. And we'll send the recording out again to everyone, and we'll include that license agreement there as well. Really grateful for all the work that you do in your parishes, and it's good to see you all this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you for the support. It's great.
Right.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye
Bye now.
Bye.